This time on CrowdQuest, we are reviewing Dark Forest, a woodland fantasy campaign setting for Shadowdark RPG, currently on Kickstarter. Here's the details. The setting is inspired by Redwall and other fantasy critter stories. It has incredible artwork with many pieces by the author himself. It has 12 new ancestries, 4 classes, 30 spells, 50 magic items, 60 monsters. There are rules tweaks to the Shadowdark core system, and as of recording, Dark Forest has wildly exceeded its funding goal in only a few days. Before we dive into this preview copy of the book, please note this is very much a prototype printed with different materials, not final text or layout, and missing some art in places, so we are only reviewing the text and design as a work in progress. But if you're interested in the final version, using my referral link in the description will earn me a commission from the publisher. From the table of contents, you can see that the book is already over 200 pages, and with the number of stretch goals unlocked, I wouldn't be surprised if it reaches around 300, and as we flip through, you'll see it follows a similar outline to the Shadowdark core book. The introduction states that it could be played with any version of D&D from 1E to 5E with minimal changes, but the basic rules of Shadowdark have been tweaked to be more heroic. For example, rather than rolling stats 3d6 down the line, they suggest 4d6, drop the lowest in any order, and starting with maximum hit points at level 1. Also, characters start every session with a luck token. That's a rule I use in a lot of games, and spellcasters can sacrifice HP to avoid spell checks, and they don't lose a spell for the day until that spell was successfully cast at least once, which is a Shadowdark house rule I first learned from Sly Flourish. The text is written in the perspective of Nesbit the Recorder, a retired adventurer who summarizes the regions of Antilia before getting into the folk of Antilia. We have the badger, the otter, the fox, the rat, the mouse, tall folk, hawk folk, dark wings, hares, hedgehogs, squirrels, song folks, shrews, and moles. Oh, and owl folk, almost didn't see that. The ancestries are unique and flavorful. The fox's fast reflexes, the hedgehog's defense curl, the hare's extra movement, the mouse's nimble dodge, the badger's powerful paws, taking the half-orc's mighty talent, but adding a burrow speed, and more on the next couple spreads. I will point out that feathered folk cannot fly. They can only glide, and they have to have free hands to do so. And actually, there are 16 ancestries already in this preview copy, so with 12 plus advertised, some of these may be considered stretch goals, I'm not certain. The classes will seem very familiar if you've played Shadowdark. We have the warrior, the war monk, the scout and sage, clearly tied to the core rules fighter, priest, thief, and wizard, respectively, but with added talents for a bit more heroism. For example, the warrior gets the same weaponry, armor, and hit dice as the fighter, but in place of the fighter's weapon mastery and grit, it has the talent Relentless to avoid death a number of times per day, Battle Cry, which is like a temporary version of weapon mastery that could apply to all weapons, and Brave for advantage on checks versus fear. And yes, I asked the author about some of this language, proficiency and versus fear from AD&D, and he explained that he prefers these terms, though it may change a bit in the final version to better fit the conventions of Shadowdark. Just getting a look at some of these art pieces here. Here's a good example of the feathered folk needing their hands and not being able to fly, just glide unless they have free hands. And skipping to the sage, I want to point out that each class has these wonderful sections about creating a character of that class and what it really means in this world. Role in the world of Dark Forest, creating a sage character, example sage archetypes, and sages in the Dark Forest. This one listing quest ideas, things that a sage character would want to achieve in this setting. Of course, there are backgrounds, titles, languages, and gear, with many more options for weapons and armor and equipment, by the way. But what stood out to me most from these sections here were the particular gear items, the boats and mounts, which have no analog within the Shadowdark core system. So this feels more brand new, really adding something to the game. Dark Forest also uses this simple reputation subsystem that I really like, relying on little bonuses or penalties for the party's deeds to different factions, and tracking how the party is perceived by the different factions of the region. There's a list of Antilia's deities before we get into spells and magic items. About 100 pages in, we come to Scions and Celebrations, a little typo here reminding us this is not a final draft, but digging into what we would typically call the lore of this setting. Between customs, feast days, there's a section for climate, as well as the flora and fauna, and life in societies as well. But the final section I'd really like to show here are the monsters, not only for the artwork, but for this list. Monsters in Antalya. No goblinoids. There are no goblins and goblinoid races of any kind in this world. Now, while I'm flipping here, there's also no humanoids, though we do have orcs as uncommon boar folk. All undead, angels, fae, demons, and giants have animal forms rather than humanoids, and it declares there are no dinosaurs on this continent. Here's a great example of what a fae or a hag might look like. And funny enough, it looks like the tree ant stand-in is the most humanoid shaped of all. But personally, I find this kind of information to be very valuable for a setting, because while holidays and regional lore are fun to write and to read, monsters are typically the #1 interface between your players and the campaign setting. Aside from a few notable NPCs, it is monsters that the players think about and remember from a campaign. And especially if you show them some of these art pieces, look at that, they're going to remember these monsters. So please let me know what you think about the Dark Forest setting. Consider using the link below to back the PDF or hardcover and support this channel. And let me know what you think about this video, which took a very different format from the first few CrowdQuest videos, but hopefully in a way that was more helpful for you in deciding whether or not this crowdfunding project is right for you. And heck, I only know one way to end a YouTube video. Thank you, and keep building.